Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The topic of this particular panel discussion, is a challenge that has long existed. We are still in the nascent stages when it comes to deep tech, potential, and perhaps not even scratch the surface. And while we may look at the US and China and think that we may have lagged behind, the truth is that India still has a huge market. We have a big talent base, and of course the low cost proposition in R&D that we have had. So on that note, let me start this panel discussion by asking Professor Ravindran, how do you define deep tech, and how is it different from any other form of tech innovation today, sir?
Okay, so this is working right now. Let's see how long it works. Thank you for priming me that you're going to ask me that question. And so I actually had a chance to look it up, because I was not sure what deep tech means, right? I always thought deep tech was like more of a marketing term. So if you want to raise more money from the VC, you then use the word deep tech. And it turns out that's what it is, okay? So I did look up. I did look up the definitions of deep tech. Okay? So the official, quote-unquote, definitions of deep tech is these are technology that really requires you to stay invested longer, but have a significant guarantee that the impact will be very high. Right? So that's basically how you hook the VC in. So you're going to promise them the impact is going to be very high. Right? But you have to stay invested, because we really don't know how to get value out of it today. Right? So in my opinion, so that would mean that this is tech that we don't completely understand yet. So AI is one of the purported deep tech, and also things like material research and quantum and so on and so forth. And these are technologies from which we don't immediately know how to drive value out of. But we see the potential that it's going to significantly yield, and both not just monetary impact, but significant social impact down the line. So I guess that's one definition of what deep tech looks like.
Dr. Harrick, would you have a different definition for that?
So I would agree with Ravindran partly. I think to me, deep tech is actually about building something that is actually non-obvious. It is actually significantly advancing the state of the art. I would actually reverse that and ask the question, what is shallow tech? Which is kind of the opposite of deep tech. So to me, shallow tech is usually application, relatively, you can say, straightforward, or applications that is composition of many things. Deep tech typically requires really doing something in an unconventional, non-trivial way that is very hard to replicate easily. And to me, that is really what defines deep tech.
Absolutely. Shekhar and Pratyush, when we talk about deep tech, what do you think are India's core strengths in deep tech today? I mean, is it across AI, quantum computing, biotech? I mean, what is it? Where does that lie?
I feel a bit like the student who missed the last few weeks of the class. I didn't get your questions, so I didn't prepare for them. Firstly, I just wanted to add to this thing about deep tech, right? So I think it is a concept that VCs use. Let's be clear about that. So it's about, in my sense, the venture risk that you take. And there are various kinds of venture risks you can take. And some risks are more about, can I push the boundary of technology, right? Which is not the obvious way to create value, just to be clear, right? I think, especially because it requires slightly longer term thinking. And that comes back to your question, where does India have strength? Frankly, in India, we have been doing deep work across pockets, but a deep tech company needs to be a full stack between doing the R&D, having a product, having the commercial model, and having the playground in the country to actually deliver that to companies with positive value, right? And that is actually a broader ecosystem muscle that we as a country haven't developed enough of, right? There are many good examples, and frankly, Ravindran from IIT Madras has shown a lot of good examples of it. But we are, I think, in the early stage of unlocking deep tech value, which is often disproportionately large. but takes more time, requires a more mature system. And all the things that you mentioned, whether it is quantum, whether it is space, whether it is AI, all of this, or even new materials, all of these are going to be in that category.
Shekhar, what do you think?
See, in fact, as IVCA, we tried to define that term recently. A technology that creates, at least on one axis, extreme disruption, either on price or some sort of value, either on time or on quality, that takes the current state to kind of to its knees. That is for us the deep tech from a VC world perspective, not for deep tech's sake. It has to disrupt the current way of doing. Like if an education costs 2 lakhs, can you bring to 200 rupees? If something XYZ, can you reduce by 10x? So that was a definition of deep tech. We kind of changed a little bit more to add, if a tech is available outside India, it's restricted in India. If that tech can be made in India, it is not deep tech outside, but definitely deep tech inside, such as semiconductor manufacturing or restricted capabilities for defense and some of those things. These are 2 areas we felt is a better definition of deep tech from a commercial setup perspective.
But that's actually, across sectors.
Yeah.
It's
like,
a
for
wide-
example, if I want to build, manufacturing at nanofiber level, it may be available, but may not be available in India. So, as a good example, so that could be a deep tech.
But which sectors do you think, there's potential for, commercialization and in deep tech?
Yeah,
And
so
some of the top
so
ones.
the next set of question is about commercialization. Is I would work backwards in terms of where the use cases are and which part of the tech I can plug in those use cases to take advantage of it. If the deep tech requires an entire ecosystem to change, then it is a massive, massive setup. And VC may not be the right way of investing. But if a plug and play is possible where phenomenal outcome, whether you take AI getting into robotics, pick and place is the old robotics models, but now with vision model, can you reduce the price significantly, make it no alignment required, and it can do it in a unmandated environment. You leave a dog here, it can walk around and walk out without being trained, is a deep tech at a significant cost reduction. So that part of things are possible right now. So for me, AI infusing into healthcare, therapeutics, aviation, defense, manufacturing, and education, every aspect is up for grabs.
Wow, that's a huge playground, actually. Professor Ravindran, why do so many promising innovations in Indian labs actually struggle to reach the market finally?
Oh, I think that other panelists have covered that significantly, and I completely agree with what Mitesh said. See, this is what happens when you attend classes. So you can quote other. So I completely agree with what Mitesh said. So basically, the market really doesn't exist in India. So it's becomes crucial for people to start looking outside for these, right? So that's one of the biggest challenges. You don't find these, thriving here, right? So, and it's not that we don't have some of these deep tech companies even started from, for example, I think Cure started here. Yeah. Right? And then you had to move out, right? So things like that, right? So I think it's not that we don't have deep tech companies, the capability is not here, but soon or later, again, Uni4 is another example from IIT Madras, which basically had to shift base. They became a double unicorn, but still they could do that only when they went out of India. So things like that. So the market absorption capacity has to be built in India, and I think it was discussed enough.
And of course, I mean, the VCs have to play a big role in that.
Yes, I mean, funding is one part of it, but we also really need the ecosystem to improve, right? So we need a capacity. This, I think, again, going back to Mitesh's example, right? So we are not ready to pay for some of the additional benefits you're going to get from deep tech, right? We're happy to take something adequate. I mean, there was this amazing series of ads which actually captured this, right? So you can show whatever you want, and then finally he comes back and asks you, "Kitna deti hai?" Right? So as long as we have that kind of an attitude in the consumer mindset, right? So it's always going to be challenging. VCs can help build technology here, of course. We need VC support to do that. But then, unless the market is ready to absorb it, so what is it that we can do to help the market absorb this, right? Until that answer comes, it's going to be hard to sustain these here.
Right. Pratyush, what do you think? I mean, how do you sort of improve the market in that sense?
I think that I would just add one more point to that before the market point. I think we also need to build full stack skill sets. We haven't built chips in a long while, which are competitive. We haven't built large scale platforms in the company in a long while, right? And we haven't, so if you look at where India makes money on software and elsewhere, we have been slightly up in the abstraction layer. In fact, if I look at our education also, it's very abstract, right? I taught GPU programming, for example. We would teach it at a place where you can, of course, build on top, but not go hack insides of GPUs and so on. And a company like DeepSeek, we think of it that it came in 1 year and did something. The people in DeepSeek have been hacking GPUs for 15 years. And they've been understanding the insights of what NVIDIA is, what PTX library assembly code looks like, and so on, right? So I think we also need a momentum around people, deep expertise across the stack. And not just now we can call it vibe code, but across the stack you need deep expertise. The market story is a little bit of a matter of coming of age, right? I think we are very efficiency conscious, which is a good thing, but recognition of innovation as something to invest in. I was talking to Mukesh Bansal the other day in his podcast, and we discussed about the 1% imperative, which is that if every listed company in India said, 1% of my profit I will put to innovate in AI, right? That is a huge playground for Shekhar to invest many, many companies in, right? I think that license to play is also useful. It'll happen, it's just taking its due course, and I think the governmental activities, the strategic sectors, larger efforts will probably see the lead, and then other companies will follow.
Right.
So can I maybe
please, yes.
just to add to that, actually the full stack is very important, but you have to also think about the domains, right? It is not just the tech stack. Actually, most of the future growth and innovation opportunities are going to come at the boundaries of traditional disciplines, like, for example, drug discovery and AI, or molecule discovery, or personalized medicine, or whatever. I mean, all of those things. So, I mean, going back to even the previous panel, the biggest opportunities are going to lie at the boundaries of traditional areas. But that can only be realized when you actually bring expertise across these things together, which actually goes back to the full stack argument. I just wanted to add to the fact that the full stack doesn't mean IT stack. I think it has to actually start domain stack, which goes back to the very first session where I think it was brought out the fact that the India advantage of domain understanding is something that has to be brought in for us to start leading, because we have to essentially lead by redefining every type of knowledge work that is out there. And if we understand the tech stack and we combine it with the domain understanding, the boundaries, we will actually completely redefine everything, which is the India opportunity in my mind.
Absolutely. And just coming back into the labs bit, how can we improve collaboration between research institutions and startups? Maybe Professor Ravindran can start, and I'll talk to.
So, I mean, I'm sitting with two former academics here. So it seems that if you actually make academics work too closely with the industry, they leave academia and go to the industry. So we have to be very careful as to what we recommend. So if people don't know, I mean, Harik had a pretty long career as a professor before he switched to coming to the industry. And of course, Pratyush, as you can see, he still hankers for teaching GPU programming even today. So, but the point is that has to be enabled, right? So the thing is, so one of the biggest problems I have with Indian academic curriculum right now is that we are not training people to be builders. right? So we are really training people to not necessarily get into a tinkering mode and things like that, right? So in fact, strongly discourage people from exploring. Forget about the IITs and forget about the cream of the universities. Maybe you can always come up with counter examples, but they are not the ones that are going to drive the larger innovation ecosystem, right? You're going to get very few people coming out of it. You go to many other colleges, like even not even tier 2, tier 1 colleges, right? There are labs which are opened only for when the inspection teams come around. Right? When the college inspection teams come, not for students to work on it, and only for getting the brownie points, the tick marks, and things like that. Our curriculum is significantly more rote learning based and things like that. So I think that has to change, and that comes from closer engagement with industry, right? So I know that there are several companies. I mean, IBM is one that I can pick out examples where they actually go and work with tier 2 colleges and making sure that they are building tinkering labs and workshops where they work with their hands on these systems. I think that's something from the very basic levels we should start inculcating even in schools, right? And then that would lead us to have an ecosystem, right, where companies feel more comfortable going and working with academic institutions because they know that they'll have value there, right? As opposed to them having to really dig around and then find out who are the few places where they can go and work with. Right? I think we should have a much more broader system rethinking of how we do the curriculum in India. So that's one certainly thing that we have to do.
Dr. Herrick, you've been on both sides, so what are your thoughts on that?
No, I would agree completely. I think, so one of the things that we have tried experimenting with is actually moving our industrial research labs onto campuses, because that's actually a great way to collaborate back and forth. We've also built what we call as a co-innovation network, which is sort of an open innovation platform, if you will, which allows us to also understand where the startups are going, the emerging tech, and actually bring everything together. So that is something that I think is very, very useful and powerful. The other thing I would say in the context of India is that there are these national missions now, whether it is in AI or cyber physical systems or quantum and things of that sort, that is actually funding to a great extent translational research, which is where many of the sort of academic ideas sort of often fall through and sort of the valley of death. So we have to find this sort of a tripartite model where sort of, if you will, TRL 1 to 3 actually gets done in an academic setup, TRL 4 to 6 happens more funded by these national missions, and then eventually the startup, the VC style funding to actually scale up. But it has to, in order for that to work, having clarity of purpose and conviction, as was talked about earlier, becomes incredibly important, because you cannot start left to right and then eventually figure out how to scale. You have to almost go right to left and then left to right, which is sort of an interesting thing that we have to probably perfect.
Absolutely. Shekhar, would you like?
Yeah, so I think we're thinking forward. I think we need to work backwards. Say, I have funded 2 deep tech companies, very similar faculty, PhDs, postdocs, have been there. But the conversation started with them not about tech or the deep tech. Conversation started about the use case and the business model. And they had spent enough. Say, one of them said, I will reduce the cost of RNA sequence from $300 to $30, 10x reduction. And if I can do that with a new technology, would you be interested? That's where the starting point is, right? Another one, which is in the quantum, saying that I can demonstrate quantum advantage in the next 24 months versus 2030, 2035, and say a large set of matrix operations, and that's where the starting point is, then it makes sense for us to back these. What happens is tech teams, product teams have some interesting tech, they start building it out, and then they start looking for use cases where I can apply. Instead, if we can get every one of our research groups and missions to start saying, assume you have built this, where this can apply and bring it down, you will see a material rush for a lot of deep tech companies. The capabilities of these researchers is unbelievable. But the
is there-
approach and method is very poor. By the time they come, they're already exhausted because everybody has said no to them.
But is there a way to incentivize, these researchers to sort of think commercially in that sense?
That's the starting point. Actually, I wish not only the students, I would say faculties have to be part of industry right now to understand what happens. That's what I see in the, the Valley, in the Stanford and so on. So much of exchange, so much of activity happening. Thanks to IIT Madras, I see that part. I'm from IISc, I go there. I've been pushing very hard. How to get startups. They're in the Bangalore, but almost irrelevant in the Indian ecosystem from a startup perspective. Now they're starting it out, they're pushing it out. But it takes a while for everybody to understand, because at the end of the day, all tech, deep tech, software, VC, everything else gets trumped by the business model. If you don't have the business model, everything stops. So I would start from there and work backwards.
Right. Just a follow-up. Are the current funding timelines and expectations sort of aligned with the long gestation periods of the deep tech cycle?
Actually, the gestation period is not the issue. Framing the problem is the issue. People don't frame it right in terms of, I give benefit of doubt, say 3 years, 4 years, even 5 years. It will get it done. But what is the impact of that? One has to clearly articulate. If you articulate, then you know how much is the money required and the risk factor, and somebody can compute it and do it. Most of the times is left to investors to figure out that, but not the team. And that is a non-starter.
Pratyush, just a follow-up to that. How do you see Indian investors, perceive deep tech, compared to, software sector, for instance?
I'm not an investor, so it's hard to say.
But your thoughts on it?
I think, investment is a very, very planned game, right? So I think everybody has a playbook to it, and I think they understand, like Shekhar is saying, they understand what the value creation is and so on. I feel positive that in India now we have an ecosystem where investors are willing to bet on deep tech. I think that little hill climbing we have done now in the ecosystem, enough money has been made with whatever consumer grade internet companies and so on. There's now this feeling, both pride and investment thesis to do the next set of things. And I think a lot of, I see the next 10, 20 years as being a very good time for doing deep tech in India, both because strategically we need it now as a country. We are waking up to it, and there is also the capital efficiency is also happening, right? So I see shoots of that. More can be done, but I do see that is positive.
Dr. Harrick,
Deep tech is actually a phenomenal category for investment. The challenge is when it is ill-defined versus well-defined. If it is well-defined, I think money, unbelievable amount of money is there, because you have moats in terms of tech, in terms of patents, in terms of IP. You have business model disruption. Say a blood test today in Bangalore with home collection is 1,500 rupees. And you look at the full business case, and you look at what the lab costs are, and if you do fully automated, can you bring down to, say, 200 rupees? I guarantee you that person can raise $10 million today. But that's not where they start. I have an equipment, it can do this, it can do plasma, it has got a camera, it has got that. That's where they start. Somebody else's problem to package it. I think the fundamentally you have to shift, if the investments have to happen, on the technologies to package, as I said, work backwards.
I mean, starting with value is absolutely essential, which is the right to left, right? Yes. Start with value and then build the technology to actually.
Right. Dr. Harrick, they spoke about this in the previous panel as well. But what is the role of the diaspora and, the returning talent in building the deep tech ecosystem in India today?
Well, I think it's probably just bringing a lot of the thinking. But I mean, I would actually say that it's not that we don't have the talent. I think it's exactly mindset change, which is actually starting from value and then walking backwards. That is required. And I think what is there in the Indian diaspora outside the country is actually a lot of that experience. If that is something that comes back, then I think it'll, certainly accelerate the entire piece. But it's not that we don't have that here.
Dr. Ravindra, do you agree with that? Do we have that sort of the talent pipeline to build that deep tech commercialization in India?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I'll absolutely agree with that. I mean, we have seen that happen multiple times already. Like I said, it's not that we don't build it here. We build it and then move it elsewhere. So I think building it here is not a challenge. And let me actually, I mean, given that I'm in a place where we have a lot of VCs and things, I should self-promote a little bit, right? So I say one of the best models that you have for this is in IIT Madras. I think many people would agree with that. In fact, we are doing something very different right now. We have hired a team of consultants who go to departments and tell people, don't publish your work. If you have done something very innovative, don't publish your work. First, talk to us, right? We will tell you, I mean, if that is a way you can, productize it, take it to market, and then you go and publish it. This is something that we have started very recently. So to that extent, whatever you say, right, so talking about value, that is not something that we do readily.
That's not natural.
That's not natural thinking for us. So
Historically, it's been about publishing.
we are
right?
getting people to come and tell us now, right? So that's something that we are doing. I think that this thought process should be inculcated in people. I completely agree with that. I don't think there is a dearth of talent. And of course, that's not to say that we don't want people to come back. Please do come back to India, because the more the merrier, right? So certainly that. And like Harik said, they do bring in the thought process, and so I think we should get them back.
Right. Since we're running short on time, I'll just move to the last question that I have, which is, what are 2-3 immediate actions that you would personally sort of recommend to unlock India's deep tech potential? I'll start with you, Professor Ravindra, and then move to the other.
I don't know, you should ask the others. I mean, if I know all of these answers, I'll still not be in academia. I'll be joining.
Dr. Harik.
Well, I want to actually go back to the previous panels. There's a lot of that we had talked about skilling for AI. And to me, actually, the thing that we should be thinking about is AI for skilling, actually. Because to me, I mean, what would keep me up at night? I think the question that was asked, which is somewhat similar to what you're asking, is what will you do with 1.5 billion people? Right? We have to actually find ways to augmenting them to become almost supercharged with technology so that they can actually move mountains. Which is not to say that they should all be trained to do prompt engineering or things of that sort. It should be actually the question is, how do we actually use AI to make them better versions of themselves? That's a huge opportunity. So in some sense, I think if you think about, half-life of a skill has shrunk from 30 years to 6 years, and it's shrinking fast, right? All decisions that people are making based on tacit knowledge is becoming obsolete faster than ever before. So how do you make people better? Using technology is probably our biggest, both a threat and an opportunity, right? I mean, if you don't do this, we'll have challenges. And that's really where I think we should be thinking about.
So I can add, because what Harik said triggered something in me, and I'll take that clock because it has 15 seconds more on it. So, so there are a lot of people, very, very, very smart kids today, who actually understand problems, right? Because they are living with those problems, right? So what we really should be thinking about is, how do we take the skills to build solutions to those problems to these kids? So I've actually seen several initiatives in Tamil Nadu where people are actually training people to do software development and things like that, where the language of communication is Tamil. Right? These kids have, once you teach them in Tamil, they pick it up very quickly and they build solutions which they see around them. They are building solutions for the villagers. They're building solutions for the farmers that they're seeing around them. So we should enable that. And I would say that that should be something we're really looking for. I mean, talk to people who understand the problems first and skill them so that they can solve the problems for us.
Right. Pratyush?
Yeah, I would say two things. One is that we need to up our ambition in the country of what we build. I think there is, I see it as a coming of age. Now we are fourth largest economy, right? We are 1.5 billion people. We matter. What we build should be important. We should build it for ourselves. We should build it for the world. I think more ambition would do us good. And that involves also understanding the need for capitalism and the capitalist structure to create value. I think that's one part of it. The other part of it, I feel, is more cross-cutting. I think you brought about cross-cutting from a domain perspective, but I'm indexing on what Shekhar is saying, which is value creation being one of the prime movers. is a first order idea, right? But it's still not seeing up in our innovation. And that is because we don't have institutional strength in the country to cross-cut across these obvious ideas, right? What is research? What is value creation? What is talent management? What is strategy for the country? We need more institutions. And what is capitalism? How do we bring efficient capital? We need more institutions to bring that together. Now in the startup world, I clearly see it's all over siloed, very few people doing cross-cutting thinking to create value. But I'm optimistic it'll happen. But I think these two things, we should come of age and we should build better institutions.
Right. Shekhar?
My recommendation is very simple. You take everything we import today to India, anything that is more than $300 million worth, that's growing, say, 30-40% year on year. Find teams, there is enough teams. Say, go and disrupt that. Just go one after the other. In 10 years, you will build amazing capabilities. Don't have to do anything new. Simply take anything 300 million plus. There are so many things we are importing today. So many things. Deep tech, which is not possible to make today in India. Just disrupt one after the other. That list is 5 minutes in ChatGPT. Just you go through it and identify teams one after the other. There will be at least 300 ideas that can be built, $300 billion companies.
So you certain that we're going to soon have a DeepSeek or Tesla moment?
Pick everything we're importing to India today. Maybe equipment, maybe medical equipment, maybe defense things, maybe drones, maybe semiconductors. Pick everything and disrupt one at a time.
Right.
Where there's already a business model spend, you're paying massive import duty, just cut the legs off.
Right, that's a lesson for all of you. Please go check and approach Shekhar later once you find solutions. On that note, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and the panelists for this wonderful session. A warm round of applause for our panelists, please.